My name is Chesney Snow, and I'm the writer of Soil Beneath and Empirical Decay. Uh, been working with primary stages for about a decade now. Um, I started to develop this piece essentially right around, I want to say, May. I started to kind of formulate that I needed to create something, and I've been working with a collaborator with the composer Deidre Murray on a few other projects prior to this, and had developed a relationship with her, and really appreciated her process of creating music and her lineage of working on the choreo poem, uh, which is a genre that's been around, kind of pioneered by uh, Enzozaki Shange and brilliant choreographer Diane, and you know, I I started to kind of piece together moments of the idea, the concept that I wanted to do a choreo poem in the virtual space, and I was getting all of these stories from my family and from my friends of what they were experiencing uh, going through this year, 2020, and then I was contacted by Andrew and Aaron about doing something, and so it kind of aligned as they were asking me some questions, and we were just kind of talking and catching up on you know theater and where we were and what we could do together. And that's when they first proposed the idea of this commission, which really allowed for me to kind of hone in and really begin to put the ideas on paper, and to meet with the composer and discuss what can we do. And so the concept has changed and transformed a bit since we originally had our dialogue on it, as conditions changed. We weren't sure if we would be able to meet up, to actually film it live, if we could, do it in a theater, if we had to do it in the homes, in our homes. And so, yeah, we've I feel like we've got something that is a beautiful beginning to a story. The story of Soil Beneath is, it's collected from all of these uh, real stories. So the characters are based on real people, um, and you know, obviously names are changed around, but the stories are very real, and the archetype is for the characters is something that I think is that I really wanted to be authentic. You know. So the choreo poem is a piece that is a genre that was really pioneered by Enzozaki Shange, who passed a couple of years ago, um, and Diane McIntyre uh, in the '70s, and it was a form that was really created in a way that kind of steered away from the Western idea of like what a play is, and or focusing on plot so much, and really aimed uh, to kind of get a visceral reaction and visceral emotional reaction from the audience through the mediums of poetry and music and dance, and so it's this kind of you know interweaving of these disciplines where each part or each component, each discipline is telling the story in a way that is in, they're informing each other. So for example, you know, there might be moments where the the dancer is following the instrumentalist, and then the instrumentalist is following the dancer, and it's just and the way that it's created, I feel is very organic, and it was, originally in the 70s, it you know I think it felt, I wasn't born until 79, so obviously this is just from research and reading and speaking with the people who were a part of its creation, and in the first productions of For Colored Girls Who've Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough, which is like basically regarded as the first choreo poem. Um, it was a piece, it was a way to tell our stories, from the black experience in a way that was just raw and wasn't kind of confined by the parameters of um, you know what the dominant culture, if you will, placed upon the idea of creating, or the practice of creating theater. So it really did eschew plot and really eschew, like kind of went away from the idea of linear storytelling. Um, and I think today there is a lot of, there's kind of a void of exploration. There's been a rebirth of, of the form, which is really exciting because it allows for us, I feel, to be able to, uh, explore in ways that, uh, explore the form in ways that can break ground, you know, and but it's also challenging, because whenever something is new, or it's not necessarily uh, in our everyday experience or language of what we expect, it can feel, maybe to some people feel foreign. Uh, but I think that it's really, I love the craft of it, or the form of it. And when I go and speak to young people you know, who've really been brought into it through For Colored Girls, um, there's a hunger to really explore it. There's so little information about the genre out there, but that's also a very exciting thing, right? So there's certainly, uh, because Intozaki, she did so much work, and there were a lot of choreo poems that were happening. I mean, For Colored Girls eventually went to Broadway, you know, uh, you know, long, long time ago, and there's there's definitely a foundation there that that we can look at, and we can kind of mine in terms of what was done before. But it's also a really exciting moment because we can also, it's ripe for exploring, and modern dance really, from my interactions with it, and working with dancers, and uh, you know I've been working with dancers for a while now. From a lot of my career as a beatboxer, I've been working with dancers, but more specifically in the last couple of years, since I did a choreo poem called "The Unwritten Law," which is more of a biopic play, that is in the form of a choreo poem. uh, but I've really been able to kind of immerse myself in understanding and learning and watching archival footage of modern dance, and how they used uh, lyrics and poetry to be a part of their modern dance shows. And so I was really inspired by a lot of what I was seeing in this archival footage. Good friend of mine, Rebecca Aarons, who uh, who worked on my show, The Unwritten Law, really did kind of open my world up to this world of modern dance. And so I've been going to see some shows and really diving into like how does this discipline tell a story, and um, I just find it so beautiful, to see bodies in space moving in such a way that uh, captures our imagination and enhances the text and supports the text. And it's just, I think, a really beautiful way for us to explore storytelling. And I feel like uh, with this with this pandemic, with theaters being shut down and everything kind of going virtual online, um, it's a medium, or it's a genre, it's a form that can really make the kind of one dimensional screen that the virtual world kind of gives us. It really does bring it alive. And that's what I was really hoping to do with this piece, Soil Beneath. It was really ambitious because, I haven't seen theater companies taking that type of risk. I've seen a lot of readings, and certainly, film is a whole other, discipline. But this idea of bringing live performance in the choreo poem and in the play, because a choreo poem, it has the play, it has a play structure, it's storytelling, it's also poetic, and it's also musical, and so the text goes with the music, you know and so we're really trying to weave all of these things together to create an experience and tell a story that hopefully audiences will find inspiring and engaging. What's that there's that expression that, in every, you know major crisis there is a major opportunity, right? And so I feel like with this, you know I would hope that a theater, or that theaters would be able to say, okay, we we've got this we have to have some kind of virtual content. How do we engage audiences, in a way that that really maximizes the potential of this medium? And I think there are many different ways to do that. I think the choreo poem is one of those ways. I think it can allow uh, for theaters to really create audiences outside of their immediate demographic, or geographic area, rather. Um, so if you create, content, and you can have, if you're in Seattle, you can have someone in Miami viewing your work, your workshops, your plays, your staged readings. And so there's a lot of potential in expanding the world, or the base of theater and storytelling um, in this medium. So I think that that's really exciting. And so what I've been kind of, you know formulating in my mind is, you know you can have a version of this, or let's say if this is a one act version, um, that can live online, or be accessible online. Then you can also have a more full version that is actually the staged version that people would then go and see, right? And so I think that there's a a friend of mine, Millicent Johnny, who I really just respect so much, really kind of opened my eyes to this idea of live cinema, where you're shooting this really high quality cinematic story, but it moves as a live performance. So it's kind of a dance, if you will, of technology and performance, and you're seeing, a film being created right before your eyes on a large screen. Um, I think that's an interesting concept, uh, and I think it allows for us to create live performances in this kind of digital medium, or in the theater. What I love is like when you can have something on stage, and there's something about when you have a body on a stage and you put a camera or a few different cameras that are coming at different angles on that body, and you can project those onto the stage so that the audiences can really see it in a lot of different dimensions in a way, right? So you can see the body of the dancer or the performer speaking, like as you're watching from the stage, but you might also be able to zoom in on a hand, you know, and that hand is telling a story. So I think that there's it's really exciting to imagine like what the choreo poem would do in that medium, where you're having this marriage of song and dance and storytelling and this digital space where you can craft almost an immersive style of for the audience, like an immersive experience for the audience in that form. I just love watching dance. I love watching dancers, and I love actors and song. And so for me, it's being a songwriter, being a musician, and being an actor. It kind of felt like the perfect space for me to be able to express uh, my voice and the stories that I wanted to tell in that medium and in that aesthetic. I tried to be nuanced in the voice. I think that if audiences want to experience storytelling, there are some amazing performances I feel in the work, and it's it's not the the narrative that we typically hear about. And I think that it is a really important narrative to be able to reflect on, on what's happening right now with the black experience in America. Uh, and I feel like my hope is that a person will can experience what we're feeling. I try to put this a raw truth on the stage, but at the same time you know really with this, there is this rage and there is this pain, but there's also this healing. And so I wanted to you know I wanted to have the function of this piece be able to do both, right? I wanted it to have hope, right? But I also wanted it to have a really sharp critical lens uh, at the kind of white supremacist structures that um, that Black people are facing within our daily lives. And I think that it's something that we're not trying to be like, in terms of like the play, it's not trying to be something that it's not, right? So it's I found it interesting that we are in this virtual space, right? And that's where we are, and that's where the play is. So I think there are moments of real truth that I find funny, but I also find touching. And I think if you really do love theater and you love storytelling, I think it's a very interesting take. And it's not what you're used to seeing in terms of uh, seeing plays read in the virtual medium. So if you're looking for something that is fresh, but relevant and can really give you an insight into maybe more of the radical mind, looking at art as a means of activism, and you really do have questions about what a lot of Black people in America are feeling right now. whether no matter what race you are, I think everyone will find something in this uh, that has beauty, but also has real truth to it. So I'm hoping that that it resonates. I feel like it's resonating from some of the feedback that I've been getting already. Um, and really, I think the one of the primary one of my primary calls to come to see, or just kind of clicking to see the show, um, is the importance. Art right now is more important than ever. Um, we, I we've just gone through a very traumatic experience as a country, not just with the COVID, but also with of what some people might describe as a real void in leadership, and humanity within that leadership. And while I don't think that that's necessarily new, I think that the arts have a responsibility, and the arts have always been a home for freedom of thought, um, as well as freedom of expression. And I think that those things now are more important than ever. Um, so by just clicking on that link and supporting these shows and supporting art in this virtual space, we can focus on keeping theater alive. I really feel that you know one of the you know one of the real uh, uh, I want to say ailments that our culture and our nation has been having is a lack of real support for the arts, in a big way, outside of the commercial sense. Because I would go when I would tour, I would go to all of these small town America, which I've lived in small town America. And then you go and you see a lot of these towns, they have a main street, right? And on that main street, there's an old theater, and there you know there are no plays happening in that theater. You're not seeing you know August Wilson or Tennessee Williams, or these classic playwrights in these small community based theaters around the country anymore. And I think that that has had uh, an effect on the culture within those communities there. Um, and that void is going to be filled by something. And I kind of feel like what that void has been filled with is kind of a real toxic uh, kind of talk radio kind of demagoguery that has really taken the place of you know small town stages where you're hearing someone like a Bob Dylan, or you're witnessing a play that really does speak to our humanity, And when you don't have that, there becomes a real divide, I feel. And so, yeah, I think that it's important to to continue to support theaters, and especially in this new space, because the exciting part is now those voices can have you know a bigger audience. It's easier for someone you know in Dubuque, Iowa, to now access work from primary stages where before they would probably never be able to do that. And what happens when we can tell stories uh, to share our humanity and gain insight, in those places. I think that there's a consequence for art not being widely accessible to people, because art is, I think, the cornerstone of our human connection. You know, and when that human connection is broken, there are consequences to that. So I think that by just by supporting theaters and coming to see shows like this that are really taking a risk. I mean, there's a it's really ambitious to work to put on a choreo poem, something that hasn't been tried more in this, space, when theaters are, a lot of theaters all around the country are facing dramatic economic challenges. And so it really does mean a lot when you support that. The way that I got into theater is it's really interesting. I came into theater when my family and we were struggling when I was in my early teens. We found ourselves in a shelter um, with my sister and my mom. And it was like watching my mom do this superhuman thing of kind of getting back up on her feet, um, and lifting our family up, which is um, you know it's that is what black women do. um, and in that process we moved to a small town where that shelter was in Wisconsin, called Platteville, Wisconsin. And this was in the you know mid 90s. And we I was kind of placed in this space where I was the only black kid in the school in rural Wisconsin. If people are not familiar with Wisconsin, Wisconsin doesn't have the greatest race relations for black people. Uh, but I don't want to condemn everyone in Wisconsin, but it's really a challenge. So it wasn't the easiest kind of transition for me, uh, being the only one of the only black kids in the school. And I went to a an English class where the assignment was a Shakespeare assignment. And I did really well on the assignment. And uh, and and then I was the high school teacher reached out to an actor who essentially led an after school program uh, that was like the fall play. And there was what they call a forensics team, which basically did like speech and debate and drama. It's actually the Wisconsin has the oldest association of that for high schools in the country, and it started like in the 1800s or whatnot. And so that person came to speak to me, and asked me uh, if I'd be interested in being in the fall play based on this English assignment. And I was up for it, and it was Othello, and it's to read this play. And I just really started to fall in love with this, with being in a play. I was in you know band and things like that. My mother always kept me in some kind of creative uh, uh, class when I was in school. So I played the saxophone and stuff like that. But it was really being in a play that began to shift my trajectory. Our class then went to go see As You Like It. And we started to see these Shakespearean plays in Spring Green, Wisconsin. It's like a school field trip. And uh, and yeah, that was the moment that I think I just really started to fall in love with theater. And because I was going through this kind of intense emotional experience of we were in this shelter, and I was kind of the odd person out at school. The play and the stage became a place where I could uh, escape, where I could feel safe, and that I really felt like I had a voice, and I felt like I was really good at something, you know. Um, and then that led to that theater teacher, Mike Willis. He really believed in me and really kind of crafted my high school experience to be immersed in theater. So I wrote my first musical when I was like a junior in high school, uh, and it that was a program that the Spanish class and the band the band teacher had kind of put together, and so I was without even really consciously knowing it, I was being immersed in theater, and so then I went to college at this little small school, called Edgewood College in Madison, Wisconsin, where I then began to study theater more. So that was kind of my entry into theater, and I just kept studying it, and I wanted to be an actor, and I it was really interesting because I was also dealing with being a black man in Wisconsin. So, I was in the probation, system. Had been, I was, falsely arrested in school. I was kind of dealing with all of the challenges that young black men are having. And so I think it was like the end of my freshman year of college, my probation officer wouldn't let me go do this play that my college was putting on, which was like this little tour where we would tour to these little small towns in Wisconsin and tell a story called the Wisconsin Story, right? And I was on that tour, and I was the stage manager, I was the lighting guy, and I was the sound person, and I was the actor on stage, right? So I would be like in the booth running lights and sounds and stuff, right? And then I'd run down back and then run around, get on stage, do the scene, come back, run back up, do the lights, right? And that was like a little tour. Anyway, but my probation officer was like, you can't do that. And I said, well, if I don't do that, then I won't have a place to stay, because I didn't, like, at that time, my family had moved from Wisconsin to Arizona. And so in the summer, like, I didn't have anyone that I could stay with. So this play was also a way for me to like have a shelter and food and money to live. And I tried to explain that to the probation officer, and the probation officer said that if I didn't have a place to stay, I could go stay in a church, but that I could not leave the city of Madison. Now, you know, at that time I'm like 19 years old, and so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to leave. I don't, I'd already been in a homeless situation before, and I'm like, I'm not gonna be homeless again just because this person says to, I can't leave, Madison, Wisconsin to go do this play. So I left and went to go do that play. The probation officer kind of put a warrant out for me, and but I finished the play. I did the play, and then I had to go and you know deal with that. So I eventually, with Wisconsin having the highest incarceration rate for black men in the country, it I didn't feel that Wisconsin would that I would, from the experiences that I've been having with that state, I knew I needed to leave, and so I left and went to Arizona. I continued studying theater in Arizona, doing summer stock. You know, and that's really how I got immersed in theater. I started working with Jared Saccharin, and really kind of apprenticing with him. My early 20s, from the first graduating class of Juilliard. He got me into like, mask work, and I really started studying Shakespeare more, which is another reason why I just really love poetry and drama. And so there became a point where I had to leave Arizona. I got on a Greyhound bus, um, uh, went from Arizona to New York City with I had saved up about $1,000, and I moved to New York City. A friend of mine who I was doing Julius Caesar with. He had just graduated from American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco. I then went, he was living in Astoria, and he was like, you should definitely come to New York, and he's like, I'm doing summer stock. His wife, Stafford Price Clark was his name. and his wife and him, they were doing summer stock, and he's like, you can stay at my apartment uh, until you find a place. I moved to New York. I looked all around the city. I found a one bedroom apartment uptown for $700 a month. Uh, and it's just unbelievable. And that apartment was basically owned by an actor named Richard Bright, and so Richard Bright ended up becoming my mentor. Rented me my first apartment here, got me my first auditions here, and that's really how I got immersed in, kind of settling in New York. Um, I couldn't find a job when I got to New York, so I started to perform on the streets. I was like spitting poetry on the streets. I was like one of the guys who would sell like African inspired jewelry on the street, and that's how I was kind of getting by, paying my bills when I first moved to New York. And I was always beatboxing since I was I guess since I was like 14, 13, 12. That I was 12 when I started beatboxing, but like it was really like when I was 13 and 14 that I was really kind of moving in like when hip hop was on the playgrounds. And so when I got to New York, uh, to be an actor and to be a spoken word artist, I realized that it seemed like everybody else in the world had also decided to move to New York City to be an actor and a spoken word artist. So I I was like, well, I'm going to put some beatboxing in my performances, and so I would start putting beatboxing inside of my spoken word performances, and got a good response from that. And then I started to kind of meet other beatboxers uh, in New York City, and kind of developed a clique, and got kind of connected to a family of, people who were really just passionate about this quirky art of beatboxing. And um, and so those worlds, for me, beatboxing and theater were always these separate worlds that I existed in. So I was kind of making my way up in this world of hip hop and music and beatboxing, um, and I was really doing well with that. Kind of becoming, I guess, if you will, a top tier beatboxer of my generation. And uh, and then I you know, but I was always doing a play here, a play there. I There was a moment where I kind of stopped acting because I just didn't the 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 kind of commercial aspect of it was not necessarily appealing to me. Like you know, like I was asked once, if like I was at this audition for McDonald's, and they were like, well, you're great, but like we need you to make the McChicken sexy, just make it sexy. And I'm like, but I don't eat McChickens, and so I don't want to make a McChicken sexy, right? And so then that became, for me personally, like I don't knock anyone who does that, like, but I just didn't feel good about it, and I was like, well, I'm not feeling good about my acting career being like being hinged upon whether or not I can sell a McChicken. So I was like, that's when I just kind of stopped professionally going after it, and just started kind of taking whatever readings and things like that. And so that made me happy. So I was like blessed that I could have this beatboxing career that I was actually like, able to provide like a life for myself. But I didn't have to give up acting. I could just work in doing readings of things that I wanted to do, of stories that I wanted to tell. And so there was a point in 2010, and this is really where primary stages really kind of uh, merged those two worlds for me, because of the play In Transit. Uh, that was like really the first time that beatboxing, my world of beatboxing kind of connected to the world of theater in like a real way that was really, really substantial for me as an artist, and I found real happiness When I first read that role, I was just kind of hooked, you know, um, and it really sent me on a trajectory. And it's a funny story that one day we'll get into with regards to like in transit and that whole journey. But it's one of the best times of my life, and that's one of the reasons why primary stages is such a pivotal part of my journey as an artist. Coming to New York, you're always dreaming of what you're going to do, or how you're going to make your way. Um, and there became that point within transit where primary became my home, and then I started taking classes at ESPA, which I absolutely love because ESPA allowed for me as a working artist to go to school, like and keep training. It's really hard to train, when you're just working as an artist and you're trying to make a living and you don't have a lot of money in New York City, for you to have an option where you can like actually make payments as opposed to having to come up with 500 or 700 or $1,000 like up front, that's really that really makes it difficult for artists, and I think especially a lot of young artists of color, who don't have the kind of family support to be able to just say, hey, here's $700 or here's $1,000 for you to go after your dream. A lot of us don't have that, or if you're like a single parent, you don't really have those sorts of things, right? So but in order for you to keep studying, ESPA really kind of made a model where it made it a bit more accessible, and the quality of instruction was just phenomenal. So ESPA really became a home for me, between after In Transit closed off Broadway. Over the years, ESPA really kind of kept me going, kept me training while I could continue to work as an artist. I really appreciated it, and I really hope that people continue to support ASPA, to support primary stages, because there's some great work happening, and I appreciate you all working on yourselves, and continuing to develop, as an organization, because these are really challenging times, and I think that this is a real opportunity for us to do some real reflection of who we are as as institutions, who we are as a individuals, who we are as a culture, and really come out of this stronger, and better, and more equitable. You know, saying if I was going to give advice, if there was like closing advice to uh, my fellow ESPA colleagues and just artists in general who are creating work, I would say that one of the lessons that I've learned through the years of this is like, and I'm sure our elders, my elders would say the same thing. Your team is critically important. Like who you roll with is critically important to the successes of your work, right? So you want to be able to really be able to trust and believe in those people. So sometimes you might have a great opportunity, but you know that you may not align with that person or that producer, or whoever that is. Like you shouldn't feel like you have to uh, uh, diminish yourself, or sacrifice your integrity for the sake of of getting work out there, right? Like you want, because most of the time it doesn't work, right? um, what does work, what is successful, is when you're able to gather the team around you. Like I'm only my work is only going to be as great as my each individual team member, each individual collaborator that I'm working with. So I've got to make sure that those that I can trust them and they can trust me, and that they are of the caliber and quality that I want to work with as a person, as a human being, not necessarily just as like how great their artistry is, right? And if you do that, if you really focus on, making sure that you're aligning yourselves with positive energy, then it's like, even with the challenges that you might have in the actual creation of the work, you know, the team and the brilliance of that kind of brain trust that you put together, uh, that will pull the work through, right? And because your work is always going to be developing, you know, so it's better to align yourself with the best people that you can. Because if you have like one toxic person or one person who doesn't believe in you, then or one person who's just doing it because it's a paycheck, then you're more than likely that will reflect in the work. I'm just very thankful for Primary Stages and the entire team there. For you guys really working and really taking a chance and you know believing in the work and really supporting me over the years, as I also continue to seek supporting you, because I really love you guys as as part of the family. I just want to say thank you to my incredible collaborative team on Soil Beneath, who they are all amazing in their own right, and we've kind of formed together like Voltron to create something that I think will be very, I hope will resonate, but I think it's really worth taking, 30, 40 minutes out and listening to some brilliant artists tell stories. So I really do hope that people join us.